The wisdom of silence, embracing inner peace through Buddhist teachings. In a world that never stops, where the hum of technology, the bustle of everyday life, and the constant chatter of our minds bombard us from every direction, have you ever wondered what it would feel like to experience true silence? Not just the absence of sound, but a deep, profound stillness. The kind that connects you to the very essence of your being, that offers clarity and peace amid the chaos. Think about it. We live in a world of constant movement. Our days filled with endless tasks, our nights restless with thoughts. The older we get, the more we seem to be running to keep up, constantly racing against time, running from memories we can't shake or anxiously awaiting things that have yet to come. But somewhere beneath all of this noise, a truth is waiting for us, something so simple, yet so powerful. True peace does not come from more noise, but from the quiet that already exists within us. As the Buddha wisely taught, the path to inner peace is found not in the world's constant demands, but in the silence. A silence that is not just the absence of sound, but the presence of our true selves. It is a space untouched by the pressures and distractions of life. What if I told you that silence holds the key to unlocking your deepest peace, clarity, and understanding? Take a moment right now. Wherever you are, close your eyes. Take a deep breath, not to escape, but to connect. In this stillness, begin to listen not to the world, but to your breath, to the quiet rhythm of your heart. In this pause, you might just discover a place within you, untouched by the external noise, a sanctuary that has always been there, waiting for you to return. This video holds the key to unlocking the wisdom of silence. It is filled with insights that will guide you back to the calm center you've always had within. I invite you to stay until the end, to not just watch, but to experience what silence can truly bring to your life. Trust me, this is the peace you've been searching for, and it's closer than you think. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because what you're about to discover can change the way you experience life. Let's dive in and see how the wisdom of silence can transform everything. Part 1: The Power of External Silence, a Path to Clarity. In a world where we are constantly surrounded by noise, the endless hum of our thoughts, the bustle of daily life, and the demands of others, it can sometimes feel like we're drowning in the cacophony. The need to do more, achieve more, and be more seems unrelenting. It's in this environment that we often forget the power of silence, not just as the absence of sound, but as a space for clarity and peace. True silence is not simply about turning off the external noise. It is about creating room for stillness, where we can connect with our deeper selves and the present moment. Silence, in the Buddhist tradition, is a powerful tool for understanding and transformation. It's more than just the absence of words. Silence is an invitation to step back from the noise of life and reconnect with the essence of who we are. Just as a river, filled with debris, becomes clear when left undisturbed, so too does the mind become clear when we allow space for stillness. The distractions of the world, the constant rushing and reacting, cloud our thoughts and emotions, making it difficult to hear the deeper wisdom that lies within. But when we step away from these distractions, even for a moment, we create the opportunity for clarity to emerge. In that clarity, we find peace. The Buddha, in his own journey toward enlightenment, often sought out silence, not as a retreat from the world, but as a way to connect with the truth that resided beyond the noise. Silence, for him, was an active practice. It was through silence that he was able to reflect on his thoughts, connect with his heart, and understand the nature of suffering and liberation. It was in these moments of stillness that he found the answers to life's most profound questions. Silence was the path that led him to wisdom, and it is through silence that we, too, can find our way back to ourselves. There is a story of a monk who, in search of peace, went on a silent retreat in a remote monastery. At first, the silence was unbearable. His mind, so accustomed to the constant noise of life, seemed louder than ever. His thoughts were scattered, and the stillness made him uncomfortable. He longed for the distractions of the world, thinking that silence was something to escape. But over time, as the days passed, the distractions began to fade. His mind started to settle, and the noise he had feared became a distant memory. In the silence, he began to see his thoughts clearly, without judgment. The more he embraced the stillness, the more he was able to connect with a deeper wisdom that had always been within him. Only by allowing himself to experience silence could he find peace, not as an absence of thoughts, but as a clarity that allowed him to understand himself and the world around him more deeply. This story illustrates the power of silence as a way to clear the clutter of the mind and reconnect with the present moment. Silence is not about escaping our thoughts, but about observing them without attachment. In our busy lives, we often try to push away our thoughts, our emotions, or our fears. We fill every moment with distractions because we are afraid to sit with what lies beneath the surface. But it is precisely by sitting with our discomfort that we begin to understand it. In silence, we find the space to face what we've been avoiding, and in doing so, find the freedom to let go. However, silence is not always easy. For many of us, especially as we grow older, silence can feel uncomfortable. Our minds resist stillness because it forces us to confront the very things we've been avoiding, our fears, regrets, and insecurities. In those moments, silence can seem like a heavy weight, pushing us to face what we've kept hidden. But it's in that discomfort that growth happens. Just like a tree must weather storms to grow strong, we must face the discomfort in silence to become more resilient. The Buddha taught that it's not the absence of suffering that brings peace, but the acceptance of it. In silence, we stop resisting the noise of the world and the turbulence of our minds. We allow ourselves to simply be, to accept things as they are, and in that acceptance, peace is found. While external silence is valuable, it's the silence within that brings the most profound clarity. The practice of quieting the mind, of observing our thoughts without getting entangled in them, is essential to achieving true peace. The Buddha's meditation teachings encourage us to notice our thoughts as they arise, but not to identify with them. They come and go like clouds across the sky. Our job is not to stop the thoughts, but to observe them without attachment. By doing so, we make room for the deeper wisdom that resides within. This practice of mindfulness, of being present with our thoughts without judgment, is transformative. It teaches us to live in the moment without constantly looking back or worrying about the future. The more we embrace this practice, the more we can live with intention and clarity. We stop reacting to life automatically and start responding with awareness. In our daily lives, we can bring the wisdom of silence into our relationships, our work, and our personal time. Silence is not only about retreating into solitude, it's about integrating mindfulness into every aspect of our day. In our conversations, silence allows us to listen more deeply, not only to others but to ourselves. It gives us the space to pause before we react, to choose our words with care, and to respond with compassion. Silence becomes a powerful tool for connection both with ourselves and with others. In silence, we show up fully not just as listeners but as present, compassionate beings. In a world that demands more and more from us, silence offers a refuge. It offers us the space to breathe, to reflect, and to reconnect with our inner peace. As we grow older, we often feel the weight of the world more acutely. We may struggle with feelings of regret, missed opportunities, or the fear of change. But silence reminds us that we are not defined by our past or our future. In the present moment, we are enough. We have always been enough. Silence is the space where we remember that truth. The practice of silence is not a passive act. It is an active choice to step back, to pause, and to listen. It is a commitment to connect with the deeper wisdom that resides within us all. Silence is a return to our true nature, a place of peace and clarity that is always available to us, no matter what life brings. So, take a moment today to embrace silence. Whether through meditation, reflection, or simply pausing during your day, allow the noise to settle and create the space for stillness. In this space, you may discover the peace and clarity you've been seeking all along. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of something much deeper, a quiet wisdom that leads us to a life of greater understanding, compassion, and peace. Part 2: The Inner Silence, Quieting the Restless Mind. In a world where we are constantly bombarded by noise, both external and internal, the quest for true peace often feels elusive. As we grow older, our minds can become more restless, churning with past regrets, fears about the future, and a constant analysis of the present moment. The external noise of life may calm, but the internal noise, the incessant thoughts, judgments, worries, and desires, continues to stir, preventing us from experiencing the present fully. We've all felt the overwhelming flood of thoughts at some point in our lives. It's as though the mind is a restless monkey, jumping from one branch to the next, never settling. This constant mental activity keeps us distracted, clouding our ability to truly connect with the present moment. For many of us, especially as we grow older, this mental restlessness becomes even more pronounced. We replay events from the past, worry about what lies ahead, and overanalyze every situation we encounter. Our minds never seem to stop, and in this constant motion, we lose touch with the stillness that resides beneath the surface of our thoughts. But here's the wisdom that the Buddha imparted. The mind, while restless, is not our true nature. It is simply a collection of thoughts and experiences that come and go. These thoughts are not permanent and they do not define us. In his teachings, the Buddha compared the mind to a restless monkey, jumping from one thought to another, constantly seeking something new to grasp. He taught that the key to peace lies not in trying to control the monkey, but in observing it, letting the thoughts come and go without attachment. This is where the practice of meditation, particularly mindfulness meditation, becomes so transformative. The Buddha's meditation practice invites us to step back from our thoughts, to observe them without judgment, and to let them pass like clouds drifting across the sky. In this way, we create space for a deeper kind of silence, the silence of the mind, where clarity, wisdom, and peace naturally reside. Many of us, especially as we grow older, carry the weight of the world in our minds. We worry about our loved ones, our health, our achievements, and the choices we've made. These thoughts create a constant hum in the background of our lives, never allowing us to truly rest. But in Buddhist practice, We are taught that the key to quieting the mind is not to force the thoughts away, but to observe them, to let them be what they are, and to not get caught up in them. By doing so, we create the space for stillness to arise naturally. One of the simplest, yet most effective ways to achieve this inner silence is through mindful breathing. Mindful breathing is an ancient practice taught by the Buddha as a means to anchor ourselves in the present moment. It's a simple yet profound technique. With every inhale, we bring our attention fully to the present. With every exhale, we release the mental clutter that fills our minds. This is a way to ground ourselves in the here and now, to allow our thoughts to come and go without becoming entangled in them. Every breath is an opportunity to return to the present, to settle the restless mind, and to create space for peace. In those quiet moments of focused breathing, we allow the noise of our thoughts to settle, like dust gently falling in still air. In this silence, we can hear our inner wisdom, the voice that has always been there but often gets drowned out by the noise of life. When we focus on our breath, we shift our attention away from the mind's constant chatter and reconnect with the stillness that resides within us. In Buddhism, silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is the presence of clarity, wisdom, and understanding. The Buddha taught that when we can quiet the mind, we create the conditions necessary for deeper insight. It is in the stillness of the mind that we can connect with our true nature, the part of us that is unchanging, peaceful, and wise. This inner silence is the birthplace of all clarity. When we stop chasing after fleeting thoughts and distractions, we make room for a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. But achieving inner silence isn't always easy. In fact, for many of us, it can be incredibly difficult to quiet the restless mind. Our thoughts are like a constant storm, swirling and tumbling over one another. The idea of sitting in silence, facing our thoughts head-on, can seem daunting. And yet, it is precisely through this discomfort that growth happens. The Buddha himself sat in silence for years, facing his own mind, observing it without attachment, and in doing so, he achieved enlightenment. He did not run from his thoughts. He sat with them, observed them, and allowed them to pass. As we practice mindful breathing and meditation, we start to realize that our thoughts are not permanent. They are like clouds that come and go. We do not need to hold on to them, nor do we need to push them away. Instead, we simply observe them, let them pass, and make space for the silence beneath. Over time, as we continue to practice, the mind becomes quieter and we begin to experience a deeper sense of peace. In the quiet moments of our practice, we can find the answers we've been searching for. When we let go of the mental clutter, we open ourselves to the wisdom that resides within. Our thoughts may still arise, but they no longer have the power to control us. Instead of being swept away by the currents of our mind, we begin to notice the stillness beneath, the peace that has always been there, waiting for us to reconnect with it. This practice of mindfulness and meditation is not just about quieting the mind. It is about cultivating a deeper awareness of who we truly are. As we sit in silence, we begin to discover a part of ourselves that is beyond the noise, a part that is always present, always calm, and always at peace. It is in this space of inner silence that we can access our true wisdom, our compassion, and our ability to live in harmony with ourselves and others. The Buddha taught that the mind is like a garden. If we leave it untended, weeds of fear, desire, and distraction will grow, making it difficult to see the truth. But when we practice mindfulness and meditation, we tend to the garden of our mind, removing the weeds and allowing the flowers of clarity, peace, and wisdom to bloom. Through this practice, we learn to cultivate a mind that is calm, clear, and open, a mind that is free from the restless chatter that so often keeps us from experiencing the present moment fully. In many Buddhist teachings, there are stories that illustrate the power of silence and the peace that comes from quieting the mind. One story that stands out is that of a Zen master who, upon meeting his students, would often say nothing at all. Instead, he would sit in silence with them, allowing them to simply experience the stillness of the present moment. Over time, his students began to understand that it was not in the words he spoke, but in the silence he embodied that true wisdom resided. This story reminds us that silence is not a void. It is a profound presence that carries deep meaning. In the silence, we discover our true nature, the nature that is beyond our thoughts, beyond our worries, and beyond our attachments. As we grow older, we are often faced with the challenges of aging, the physical limitations, the loss of loved ones, the changes in our lives. But in the silence, we are reminded that we are not defined by these things. We are not defined by our bodies or our circumstances. We are defined by the peace that resides within us, and in this peace, we find the strength to face whatever life brings our way. The practice of mindful breathing and meditation is a journey, one that unfolds slowly over time. It is not a quick fix, nor is it always easy. But it is through this practice that we find the clarity, wisdom, and peace that we seek. It is in the silence that we learn to live with compassion, to understand ourselves and others more deeply, and to find joy in the present moment. So, the next time you find yourself overwhelmed by the noise of the world, take a moment to sit in silence. Focus on your breath, observe your thoughts without attachment, and allow the stillness to settle in. In that silence, you will find the peace that has always been within you. You will hear your inner wisdom, the voice that has been drowned out by the noise of life. And in that silence, you will find the clarity and understanding that you have been seeking. Embrace the inner silence. It is the gateway to true peace. Part 3. Silence as a path to self-awareness. Silence is often seen as an absence, the absence of sound, the absence of distraction. But in the teachings of Buddhism, silence is far more than just an absence. It is a powerful tool, a gateway to self-awareness and inner peace. In a world filled with noise, both external and internal, the gift of silence allows us to connect with a deeper part of ourselves, a part that is often drowned out by the constant chatter of our minds. As we grow older, we may find ourselves reflecting more on the past, worrying about the future, and constantly analyzing the present. The mind becomes more restless, moving from one thought to the next, like a monkey jumping from branch to branch. In these moments, silence becomes a refuge, a place where we can pause and reconnect with who we truly are. The Buddha, in his own journey toward enlightenment, often withdrew from the noise of the world and entered a space of deep silence and meditation. It was in this silence that he found the answers to life's most profound questions. It wasn't through endless debates or external teachings that he attained wisdom, but through the stillness of his own mind. In the silence, he could listen not just to the world around him, but to the whispers of his own heart. Silence, in Buddhist practice, is not just a retreat from the world, it is a return to the true self. When we embrace silence, we create the space to listen to our own thoughts, feelings, and desires, and in that listening, we discover the wisdom that lies beneath the surface. As we practice silence, we begin to notice the subtle noise that fills our minds, the constant stream of thoughts, the worries, the judgments, and the desires that distract us from the present moment. These thoughts are like clouds that pass across the sky, constantly shifting and changing. But when we allow ourselves to sit in silence without judgment or attachment, we can observe these thoughts and let them go. The more we practice, the more we realize that our thoughts do not define us. They are simply passing phenomena, temporary and impermanent. By observing them in silence, we can learn to let go of the grip they have on us and find peace. The practice of mindful breathing is one of the simplest, yet most powerful ways to cultivate silence within. As we focus on our breath, we return to the present moment. Each inhale and exhale brings us back to the here and now, allowing the noise of our thoughts to settle, like dust settling in still air. In this silence, we reconnect with the present moment and with our true selves. This practice of mindful breathing allows us to clear the mental clutter and create space for deeper awareness. With each breath, we can quiet the restless mind, returning to a place of peace and clarity. And in this peace, we find the answers we have been searching for, not in the external world, but within ourselves. True silence is not about eliminating thoughts altogether, but about creating space for them to arise and pass without attachment. It is in this space that we can begin to hear the deeper wisdom within us. The Buddha taught that the mind is like a garden. If left untended, weeds of desire, fear, and attachment will grow, obscuring the clarity of our true nature. But when we practice silence, we tend to the garden of the mind, removing the weeds and allowing the flowers of wisdom and peace to bloom. Silence allows us to clear away the distractions that cloud our minds, enabling us to see more clearly and live more mindfully. But silence is not always easy. For many, especially as we grow older, the idea of sitting in silence can feel uncomfortable. The mind is restless, filled with thoughts, worries, and memories that we have not fully processed. We may resist silence because it forces us to confront these thoughts and feelings, but it is precisely in this discomfort that growth happens. When we allow ourselves to sit in silence, to face the thoughts and emotions that arise without judgment or resistance, we begin to understand them. And in that understanding, we find the freedom to let go. Silence, then, becomes not a place of avoidance, but a space of healing. It is in the silence that we can finally begin to understand ourselves fully, to accept ourselves, and to release the attachments that keep us bound to suffering. In Buddhism, there is a profound teaching about the impermanence of life. Everything, our thoughts, our emotions, our experiences, is in constant flux. When we cling to these things, when we try to hold on to them as if they were permanent, we create suffering for ourselves. But silence allows us to let go of this attachment. In the silence, we learn to accept the impermanence of all things, including our thoughts and feelings. We realize that nothing is permanent, and in this realization we find peace. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from attachment, but that through mindfulness and silence, we can learn to release these attachments and find freedom. The practice of listening is also an important part of this process. True listening is not just about hearing words. It is about understanding the essence of what is being communicated. In silence, we learn to listen not only to others but also to ourselves. We begin to hear the subtle messages that our hearts and minds are offering us. In our busy lives, we often ignore these messages, distracted by the noise around us. But in silence, we create the space to listen deeply, not just to the words others speak, but to the deeper meaning behind them. We learn to listen with empathy, with understanding, and with compassion. And as we listen deeply to others, we also learn to listen to ourselves, to the deeper truths within us that have been waiting to be heard. The Buddha's teachings offer us a path to self-awareness through silence. As we practice silence, we begin to understand ourselves more deeply. We begin to see our patterns of thought, our desires, our fears, and our attachments. And in that understanding, we find the wisdom to let go. We realize that we are not defined by our thoughts, our emotions, or our past experiences. We are not the restless monkey that jumps from thought to thought. We are the stillness beneath it all, the awareness that observes and understands. In this awareness, we find peace. As we grow older, the practice of silence becomes even more essential. The challenges of aging, the changes in our bodies, the loss of loved ones, the reflection on our past, can bring up deep emotions. Silence offers a way to navigate these challenges with grace and wisdom. In the quiet, we can process our emotions, let go of the attachments that cause us suffering, and reconnect with the peace that resides within us. Silence becomes not an escape, but a way to face the realities of life with clarity and compassion. The wisdom of silence is available to all of us. It is not something reserved for monks or spiritual seekers. It is a practice that we can all embrace in our daily lives. Through mindfulness, meditation, and simply taking moments of pause throughout the day, we can cultivate the inner silence that leads to peace and self-awareness. As we learn to quiet the mind, we open ourselves to the deeper wisdom that lies within us. And in that wisdom, we find the strength to navigate life with compassion, clarity, and grace. In silence, we come home to ourselves. We reconnect with the essence of who we are, free from the distractions and attachments that keep us from experiencing the fullness of life. It is in the silence that we find the answers we've been seeking, the peace we've been longing for, and the wisdom to live with greater awareness and compassion. So, let us embrace silence, not as an escape, but as a return to our true nature. Let it guide us toward deeper self-awareness and a life of peace. Part 4. The Challenges of Silence. Facing the Discomfort. In a world that is constantly in motion, where our lives are filled with noise and distractions, silence can feel foreign, even unsettling. As we grow older, this discomfort with silence often becomes more pronounced. Our lives, shaped by years of routine and external demands, can leave us with minds full of thoughts, emotions, and experiences that we may not have fully processed. We become accustomed to the noise, both external and internal, and when the noise suddenly stops, it can feel as though we are left alone with ourselves, and that can be an uncomfortable feeling. Silence, in the beginning, can feel like a void, a space that is difficult to fill. It challenges us, asking us to face what we have long avoided, whether it be our fears, regrets, or desires. The mind, conditioned to avoid stillness, may resist the quiet because it brings forth the very thoughts and emotions that we try to push aside. It is as if the silence amplifies the noise within. In the absence of external distractions, we are confronted with the internal world we have long ignored. But this discomfort, as unsettling as it may be, holds within it the seeds of growth. It is through facing the discomfort of silence that we can begin to confront the parts of ourselves we have avoided. The Buddha's teachings offer profound insights into this process. He taught that the resistance we feel towards silence is not just about the external world, but a reflection of our internal attachment to the distractions of life. We cling to the noise because it serves as a shield from facing our vulnerabilities. Silence, by its very nature, exposes these vulnerabilities. It forces us to confront our own minds and hearts without the safety net of distractions. When we are silent, we are forced to turn inward. We begin to hear the thoughts and emotions we've suppressed for so long. In that stillness, our fears may rise to the surface, our regrets may become apparent, and the unresolved issues we've been carrying for years may demand our attention. But instead of running from these discomforts, the Buddha taught us to sit with them, to observe them without judgment, and to let them pass. Just as the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree and faced his own mind with unwavering determination, we too can sit with the discomfort of silence, allowing it to reveal the truth within. A powerful story from the Buddha's life exemplifies this process. After years of searching for enlightenment through external means, the Buddha sat in silence beneath the Bodhi tree, vowing not to rise until he had found the answers to life's deepest questions. In that silence, he was confronted with the temptations and fears that arose within his own mind. He could have easily turned away from them, but instead he sat with them. Through meditation and mindfulness, he observed his thoughts without attachment, and in doing so, he gained the clarity he sought. It was in the discomfort of silence that the Buddha found his liberation. This story teaches us that silence is not something to be feared or avoided. Rather, it is through embracing silence and facing the discomfort it brings that we can discover the deepest truths about ourselves. In our silence, we are no longer distracted by the noise of the world. Instead, we are free to confront our own minds and emotions. By sitting with the discomfort, we allow ourselves to heal, to grow, and to uncover the wisdom that lies within. As we grow older, this challenge of silence becomes even more significant. The experiences and memories we accumulate over the years can weigh heavily on the mind and heart. Regrets from the past, worries about the future, and the uncertainties of aging can stir up feelings of fear and anxiety. When we are still, these thoughts and emotions often arise, and they can feel overwhelming. Silence can feel like an invitation to face all of these things at once, and it's no wonder that many of us resist it. But the Buddha's teachings remind us that resistance is a natural part of the process. Our attachment to the noise, to the distractions, is what keeps us from experiencing true peace. We become attached to the external world because it keeps us from looking inward. We fear what we may find within ourselves, so we fill our lives with noise to avoid the quiet. But it is in the quiet that true peace resides. It is in the stillness of our minds that we can finally hear the wisdom that has always been present, waiting to be discovered. The challenge, then, is to embrace the silence despite our resistance. We must learn to sit with the discomfort, to allow the silence to reveal what we need to see. As we face our fears and uncertainties in the quiet, we begin to detach from the need for constant stimulation. We learn that we do not need the noise to define us. The peace we seek is not found in external distractions, but in the stillness of our own hearts and minds. There is a story of an old monk who had spent many years in deep meditation and silence. When asked how he had attained such peace, he shared a simple but profound answer. "I have learned to be at peace with myself. I have faced my own mind, my own fears, and in that silence, I discovered that I was never separate from the peace I sought. I was always whole, always complete, This monk's words reflect the essence of Buddhist practice. The journey of silence is not about escaping from the world or avoiding the discomfort of our thoughts and emotions. It is about facing those challenges head-on, embracing the silence, and realizing that within the quiet, we can find the peace and clarity we've always been seeking. It is in the silence that we return to ourselves, to our true nature, free from the distractions and attachments that once held us captive. As we continue to grow older, we may find that the challenges of silence become more pronounced. Our minds may become more restless as we reflect on our lives, our choices, and the paths we have taken. But it is in these moments that silence becomes even more essential. It is in the stillness that we can reflect on our past without judgment, without regret, and simply allow ourselves to be present with the truth of who we are. The Buddha's teachings encourage us to let go of attachment to our past mistakes and regrets, and to embrace the present moment with mindfulness and compassion. In the quiet, we also find a deeper connection with others. As we practice silence, we learn to listen more deeply, not only to ourselves but to the people around us. True listening is an act of compassion. It requires us to be fully present, to set aside our judgments and distractions, and to truly hear what others are saying. In this deep listening, we cultivate empathy and understanding, and we learn to connect with others on a deeper level. The Buddha often spoke of the importance of compassion, both for ourselves and for others. He taught that when we embrace silence, we create the space to connect with our own suffering, and in turn, we are able to better understand the suffering of others. It is through this deep listening to ourselves and to others that we cultivate compassion, a compassion that leads to healing, both for ourselves and for the world around us. The discomfort of silence, then, is not something to shy away from. It is a necessary part of the journey towards self-awareness and inner peace. When we embrace silence, we create the space to face our fears, our desires, and our attachments. In doing so, we come to understand that they do not define us. We are not our thoughts, nor are we our emotions. We are the awareness that observes them. And in that awareness, we find the peace we have been searching for all along. So, the next time you feel the discomfort of silence, do not turn away. Embrace it, sit with it, and allow it to reveal the wisdom within. The Buddha's teachings remind us that in silence, we find the clarity and peace that we have been seeking. It is in the quiet that we return to our true nature, and in that return, we discover the freedom that comes from letting go of attachment and embracing the present moment. Silence is not a void. It is the space where peace, wisdom, and compassion arise. It is in the silence that we come to understand our true nature, free from the distractions that once held us back. Embrace the discomfort, for it is through facing it that we grow and find the peace that has always been within us. Part 5. Bringing silence into everyday life. Silence, in the context of Buddhist practice, is not limited to the moments spent in meditation or during silent retreats. It is not a concept confined to special settings or isolated times of stillness. True silence is something that we can integrate into every moment of our daily lives. It is a quiet presence that can infuse our conversations, our actions, and even our thoughts, bringing with it a deeper sense of mindfulness, peace, and connection. In our fast-paced world, where we are constantly pulled in different directions by the demands of work, family, and social expectations, silence often feels like a luxury or something we only indulge in when we can afford to escape from the busyness. But the Buddha teaches us that silence is not a privilege reserved for a few. It is a practice that we can all cultivate and incorporate into the fabric of our everyday lives. Silence doesn't have to be something that requires special conditions. It can be experienced in the simple moments of life. Whether we're standing in line at the grocery store, having a conversation with a loved one, or sitting at a desk in the middle of a busy workday, silence is available to us if we choose to invite it in. One of the simplest ways to bring silence into our daily lives is by pausing before reacting. In a world that moves at an ever-accelerating pace, we are often conditioned to respond immediately to situations, to speak without thinking, or to act without fully understanding the impact of our actions. But in those precious moments of pause, when we allow ourselves to simply breathe and be present, we can find a moment of stillness that can change the course of our response. The Buddha often spoke of the power of mindful awareness in all aspects of life. He taught that every moment, no matter how small, is an opportunity to practice mindfulness and silence. The simple act of pausing before responding allows us to step out of the automatic patterns of behavior that we have cultivated over a lifetime. In that brief pause, we create space to listen, to observe, and to choose a response that is aligned with our highest intentions. In conversations, silence is an incredibly powerful tool. Often, when we are engaged in a discussion, our minds race to formulate a response, to share our own perspective, or to offer advice. But how often do we truly listen? Not just with our ears, but with our hearts. True listening, the kind that allows us to fully understand the other person's experience, requires silence. It requires that we put aside our own thoughts and judgments and open ourselves to the other person's perspective. In that silence, we create the space to truly hear not just the words being spoken, but the feelings and intentions behind those words. We also open ourselves to the deeper understanding that comes from being fully present. There is an old story about a monk who was known for his profound silence. He lived in a small village, and his reputation for wisdom spread far and wide. People would travel from great distances to seek his counsel, but instead of speaking, the monk would sit in silence, simply listening. One day, a young man came to him, frustrated with his life and the direction it was heading. He spoke for hours, pouring out his troubles and seeking answers. After a long while, the young man paused, expecting the monk to offer some words of wisdom. Instead, the monk simply sat quietly, offering no response. The young man, initially disappointed, eventually left the monk's presence feeling something he had not anticipated, a deep sense of calm and clarity. The young man realized that it wasn't the monk's words that had been most powerful, but the silence he had encountered. In that silence, the young man had the space to reflect on his own thoughts and feelings. He had been given the gift of being truly heard, and in that moment, he found the answers he had been searching for within himself. This story illustrates how silence can be a profound teacher. By holding space for others without rushing to fill it with our own words, we allow them the opportunity to discover their own wisdom. Silence doesn't always need to be filled with words. Sometimes, it's the most powerful presence we can offer. In relationships, silence can deepen our connection with others in ways that words cannot. Often, we think of relationships as a constant exchange of words, talking, discussing, sharing. But silence, when embraced, can be an equally powerful tool for connection. The Buddha often spoke about the importance of compassion in relationships. Compassion is not simply about offering advice or trying to fix someone's problems. True compassion is about being present with the other person, truly listening to their experience, and holding space for them without judgment. Silence allows us to do this in a way that words sometimes cannot. In silence, we show that we are fully present, that we are not trying to fix or solve, but that we are simply there, offering our full attention and compassion. There is a beautiful story from Buddhist tradition about the relationship between a teacher and student. The teacher had been sharing teachings with the student for many years, and one day the student asked, "Master, what is the essence of all your teachings? What is the key to understanding life?" The teacher sat in silence, offering no immediate answer. For hours they sat together in complete silence, neither speaking nor moving. Eventually the student asked again, but still, the teacher remained silent. After a long while, the teacher smiled and simply said, "The essence is this: to be fully present without grasping, without running away, but simply to be with what is." This silence, this absence of words, was the most powerful teaching the student received. It showed the student that the key to understanding life lay not in intellectual knowledge or constant talking, but in the simple act of being present with life as it is. In our own relationships, whether with a partner, a child, a friend, or a colleague, we can bring the wisdom of silence into the space we share. By choosing to listen deeply, by pausing before speaking, and by allowing ourselves to be fully present without the need to fill the space with words, we create a space for deeper connection. Silence, in this context, becomes a way to communicate not only with our minds but with our hearts. It allows us to connect on a deeper, more meaningful level, and it helps us to cultivate the qualities of patience, understanding, and compassion that are essential to healthy relationships. In addition to our relationships with others, silence can also profoundly impact our relationship with ourselves. In the quiet moments of our daily lives, we can turn inward, listening to the thoughts, feelings, and sensations that arise within us. Through this practice of self-awareness, we can learn to understand ourselves more deeply and live with greater mindfulness. We can begin to notice the ways in which we rush through life, constantly trying to do more, achieve more, and be more. In these quiet moments, we are reminded that we are enough just as we are. Silence teaches us to accept ourselves fully, to embrace the present moment, and to let go of the need for constant striving. One of the greatest gifts of silence is its ability to bring us into the present moment. In a world that constantly pulls us forward into the future or drags us backward into the past, silence allows us to be here now. When we bring silence into our everyday lives, we create the space to experience life more fully. We notice the small details, the sound of a bird outside, the warmth of the sun on our skin, the feeling of our breath moving in and out. In these moments, we realize that life is not something to be rushed through, but something to be experienced fully. Silence teaches us to slow down, to be present, and to appreciate the beauty that is all around us. The Buddha's teachings invite us to live with mindfulness, to bring our full attention to the present moment, to our thoughts, actions, and interactions with others. Silence is an integral part of this practice. It helps us to quiet the distractions of the mind and to cultivate awareness in each moment. Whether we are sitting in meditation, having a conversation, or simply walking down the street, silence is a way for us to connect more deeply with ourselves, with others, and with the world around us. As we continue to embrace silence in our daily lives, we begin to notice a shift, not only in our relationships with others, but also in our relationship with ourselves. We become more patient, more compassionate, and more present. Silence becomes a teacher, guiding us toward a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world. It allows us to connect with the wisdom that resides within us, and it leads us toward a life of peace, harmony, and fulfillment. In the end, silence is not just an absence. It is a presence that invites us to live fully, to listen deeply, and to connect with the essence of who we are. It is through silence that we find the space to grow, to heal, and to discover the wisdom that lies within us all. So, let us invite silence into every aspect of our lives, and in doing so, may we find the peace, clarity, and connection that we seek. Part 6. Embracing the silence within. As we travel through life, we often look outward for answers, guidance, and understanding. We are bombarded by the voices of others, the distractions of technology, and the never-ending demands of our busy lives. The noise, both external and internal, can sometimes feel overwhelming, drowning out the most important voice of all, our own. But as we explore the journey into silence, we begin to realize that this silence is not a retreat from the world, but a return to the essence of who we are. It is a homecoming, a journey back to our true selves, free from the judgments, distractions, and constant noise that fill our daily existence. Silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is the presence of something deeper, something profound. It is the space where we can hear the whispers of our hearts, the wisdom that lies beyond the chatter of our minds, and the peace that resides within us all. In the stillness, we uncover a clarity that has always been there, waiting for us to notice it. It is in this silence that we truly begin to understand ourselves, our fears, our desires, our dreams, and our deepest truths. It is in the silence that we find the wisdom to navigate the complexities of life with grace and compassion. The Buddha, in his teachings, often spoke of the importance of silence. He did not view silence as a mere absence of noise, but as a way of being present, fully engaged with the moment, without distraction or attachment. Silence was not a withdrawal from the world, but a deeper connection to it. In his own practice, the Buddha spent years in deep meditation, sitting in silence, facing his own mind and embracing the stillness. It was in that silence that he discovered the truth of his own nature and the nature of all things. He found that in silence, there is no need to seek or chase after anything. It is in silence that we are reminded that we are already whole, already complete. As we embrace silence, we embrace ourselves. We stop running from our fears, our insecurities, and our pain. We stop drowning out the noise of the world and begin to listen, really listen, to what is happening within. In silence, we are given the space to observe our thoughts, our emotions, and our attachments without judgment. And in that observation, we begin to see them for what they truly are: temporary, fleeting, and not a reflection of our true nature. Just as clouds pass across the sky, our thoughts and emotions arise and fade. They are not permanent. And in this realization, we find peace. It's easy to become caught up in the noise of life, to believe that we must constantly be doing, achieving, or solving problems in order to find fulfillment. But the Buddha's teachings remind us that true peace is not found in external circumstances or accomplishments. It is found within, in the quiet moments where we connect with the essence of who we are. In silence, We realize that we are enough, just as we are. We do not need to prove ourselves, to strive endlessly, or to live up to the expectations of others. We are already complete. Silence is the key to unlocking this truth, to coming home to ourselves and finding the peace that has always been waiting for us. In the years that lie ahead as we continue our journey through life, let us remember the wisdom of silence. Let us take moments each day to breathe, to pause, and to listen. It doesn't have to be a long or complicated practice. It can be as simple as sitting quietly for a few minutes in the morning, taking a deep breath, and allowing the stillness to wash over us. It can be as simple as pausing before reacting to a situation, taking a moment to listen deeply, and choosing a response that comes from a place of calm and clarity. It can be as simple as sitting with a loved one in silence and sharing the gift of presence without words. In these moments of silence, we will find the peace that has always been waiting for us. We will uncover the wisdom that lies within us, and we will discover the deep connection that exists between all beings. Silence does not separate us from the world. It brings us closer to it. It allows us to be more present, more compassionate, and more aware of the beauty and interconnectedness of all things. When we embrace silence, we embrace life itself, in all its complexity, its beauty, and its impermanence. As we continue our journey through life, let us not be afraid of the silence. Let us not see it as an absence, but as a presence that invites us to be more fully alive, to connect with our true selves, and to live with greater peace and compassion. Silence is not something to be feared or avoided. It is a gift. It is in silence that we discover our true nature, and in that discovery, we find the strength and wisdom to live a life of purpose, meaning, and fulfillment. The Buddha taught that all things are impermanent, that everything arises and passes away. The noise of the world, the distractions, the worries, and the desires, they too are impermanent. They come and go. But in the silence, we touch something eternal. We touch the peace that resides at the core of our being. And in that peace, we find the courage to face life with an open heart, to embrace each moment as it is, and to move through the world with wisdom, compassion, and grace. You are enough just as you are. In silence, you will discover that truth, the truth that has always been within you. You are not defined by the noise of the world, by the judgments of others, or by the endless stream of thoughts that pass through your mind. You are the silence that lies beneath it all. You are the awareness that observes, the peace that resides in the present moment. And in that silence, you will find the clarity, wisdom, and love that will guide you through the ups and downs of life. So, let us embrace the silence within. Let us turn toward it, not with fear or resistance, but with openness and curiosity. Let us allow the silence to guide us back to ourselves, to the peace that is always available to us. In that silence, we will find the answers we seek, the peace we long for, and the wisdom to live a life of compassion, clarity, and joy. The journey into silence is not a journey away from the world. It is a journey into the heart of the world, into the heart of who we truly are. Embrace it with love, with patience, and with gratitude, and you will discover the profound wisdom that lies waiting within you. And now, as we stand at the threshold of understanding, remember this. Silence is not an empty void. It is a portal, a doorway into the deepest corners of your mind, where clarity, wisdom, and peace have always waited patiently for you. Every moment you choose to embrace silence, you peel away the layers of distraction, of noise, of fear, revealing the unshakable calm that has always existed within. Think back to the teachings we've explored in this video, the stories of the Buddha, the lessons of mindful reflection, the transformative power of listening not just to the world but to your own heart. Each insight is a key, and every pause, a step closer to a life where clarity and compassion guide your every decision. But here's the thing. These truths are not just philosophical whispers to be ignored. They are practical, living instructions for how to navigate life's chaos with grace. And if you take even one of these lessons to heart, to sit in silence, to observe your thoughts without attachment, to breathe with intention, you will begin to notice the subtle shifts, the quiet awakenings that ripple outward into everything you do. So don't scroll away yet. Don't let this moment pass. Watch until the very last second, because every frame of this video is packed with insights that can change the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you live. Your life is too valuable to miss even a single one. If you found even a single idea here that resonates, imagine what could happen when you take all of them to heart. Pause, reflect, and embrace the silence within. Then, if you want more wisdom, more stories, and more ways to truly understand the teachings that can transform your life, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Because this channel is your sanctuary for insights that are not just interesting, but profoundly useful. And remember, every time you watch, every time you reflect, every time you practice even a little bit of silence, you are not just learning, you are awakening. So take that first step, be curious, be patient, and most importantly, be present. Because what you've experienced here is not just a video, it's a map, a guide, a mirror, and the full journey awaits those who stay to watch, to reflect, and to act.